Do you have a problem making your coffee grinder work well for making fruit and vegetable powders for your family from your dehydrated foods? I'm going to show you 5 tips on how to use your machine, how to clean your machine, and then what you need to do afterwards with your powders in order to make this be one of your favorite tools in your kitchen. Hi, I'm Darcy from the Purposeful Pantry. I want to be your dehydrating BFF, and I share safe and practical tips on dehydrating food for your family to stock your pantry for whatever you need it for. So let's get going. All right, are we ready for some tips about how to make powders out of dehydrated food with a coffee grinder? I'm using a Cosori coffee grinder here. You can use whatever kind you like. I'm sharing the experiences that I have with mine, not necessarily what the manufacturers tell you to do. So here we go. So I have a batch of strawberries. My son is loving strawberry flavored yogurt right now, and he doesn't like bits of fruit in his yogurt. So I'm going to make some strawberry powder that we can add to that. I'm going to show you how we do it here, but this is not just about making this particular powder. I'm sharing some tips on how to do this correctly. Now, what we're going to do is go ahead and fill up our bowl. First, we're going to pop the top. Now we're going to fill up our bowl. And I tried to not fill this up more than about halfway anytime doing this small batch like this. Tip 1. So we filled our bowl up, okay? So you can see it's about halfway full. And I'm just going to pop the top on. And the first tip here is do not simply blend. What you need to do is pulse. Just like this. You can see it going. Now, as you've broken this down, you can hold the button in a little while longer. What you don't want to do is simply grind. Especially if you're working with things that are harder and it takes a little while longer to do, you're going to run into a couple of problems. Either you're going to burn your motor out in your grinder, which you don't want to do, especially with these smaller machines. It's pretty easy to do. So what you don't want to do is continue this grind so much that what you do is actually create so much heat that everything gets gummy on the inside, which is why we pulse to break it down. And once we're ready to go, then we go ahead and grind a little more. So far we have this powder just like this. It is mostly grind pretty fine. Tip 2. Working with your powders and you're finding that you can't get as fine of a grind as you want. Sometimes it's the machine that you're working with, and sometimes it's just that you need to sift it out. See, I want to show you, it does get stuck in there because the heat expands that sugar. It's not wet, it just needs to be worked with, and you can see it breaks up. Okay, so what you can do is go through a fine, like I have this fine mesh sifter here that I can go in and just run this through and get the powder out. This works especially well if you're doing blueberries or raspberries and blackberries where you have a lot of seeds. This is a good way to get the seeds out if you didn't do it ahead of time. So what we have now is some bulkier part. This will take this away. You still have your fine powder here, and if you want, you can grind this piece more because it doesn't have so much material to have to work with to grind up. Tip 3. Sometimes you'll see that you get powder all over your lid, but with some machines, that powder actually goes over everything and then gets down all everywhere here. Depends on the model. I had an old Black & Decker that used to do that, would drive me crazy, and then I learned a trick. You can take a piece of plastic wrap if your machine happens to do this, and you're just going to put it over the top. Now, don't make it so big as this one because this is a little too large for the thing. Then we're going to put our lid back on. Maybe I can't because I got it too tight. There we go. So then you can go ahead and grind again. So what this plastic is doing on the top is making sure the powder stays within the cup and doesn't fly out over everything else. Tip 4. So my next tip is when you're doing this, you might find that as you're powdering, you have junk left at the bottom. Now, I'm not saying junk in a bad way, but junk to explain how this works. What I do is I take an art brush because I use this on my big blender too, like my regular size blender, so it gets all the way to the bottom. And I can go in here and just brush off that extra bit, and not waste any of that powder. It's one of my favorite things to do. You can use a pastry brush, you can use like a silicone brush if you have one. I just use this one brush because that way I can use it on all the machines that I'm working with for the grinding and get all the extra out. And then I also can take it to my lid and do the same thing. Just run it through the lid and I can get out all the extra powder here. Tip 5. Now, another tip is that when you're working with this and you find that it's got stuff stuck in there and you really can't get it out, maybe you don't want to run it through the wash because you are about to powder more things. You just don't want to mess, you just don't want to mix whatever is in here with the next batch of things that you're going to try. Here is a quick tip on how to clean your cup. Take a small amount of rice, whatever rice you have, cheap rice is fine. Take a small amount and put it in your cup, just like that. Then what we're gonna do is put your cup in, just like you're gonna work with it. Put your lid on. No, I didn't clean my lid off yet, that's fine. Then we're just gonna go ahead and pulse the rice. Oh, get it locked, Darcy, there we go. And what that rice is doing is that it's running through the blades. And I don't know if you can see the rice is kind of turned pink on the outer edges with the rice powder. It's taken and cleaned off the blades. It's cleaning out the powder from underneath the blade right here and also at the bottom. And then you can just toss that into whatever you're making for dinner tonight. If you want a little extra, once you get it really good and powdered, it just acts like a thickener and you're not wasting anything. And here's a bonus tip. So here's the next tip. I also use that art brush to clean out my machine. When you get a little extra powder in there, because if you're like me, you're klutz and a little clumsy and sometimes you make a spill, maybe sometimes stuff just happens and it gets messy, you can take that same brush and just clean out the inside of your machine. That way you're not introducing moisture to it. You can dump it. And do it just like that. There you go. Okay, now my next tip. If you can see this hole right here and you can see light coming through the end of that hole, can you see that? This is for moisture to go through the machine without getting inside of your machine into the motor. What I will do, if this gets particularly messy, I will rinse this off in a really small stream of water very quickly and allow it to drain. And it will drain right out through the hole here on the bottom of the machine. So it doesn't get into the motor compartment, it just goes straight through here to the bottom. Now, whether the manufacturer of your machine recommends this or not, I'm not gonna tell you. This is what I do with mine. So this allows me to rinse off really quickly for the water to drain through, not to get into your motor and mess anything up. But it helps clean off gunk if the brush isn't doing a good enough job for you. Now my very last tip is really not a tip, but it's a storage thing for me. I love these little clips that I get from Amazon to help with cord management. So what I'll do is I just get these and they are adhesed on, so they have adhesive on the back. I put them on there, then I can just wrap the cord right around here and clip the cord like this. And there's no issue with cord management, because cord management when you have a bunch of machines that you're working with can be a big pain in the butt. Okay, so for the last thing I want to show you is just the powder, okay, so that you can see how I would do it. So I'm just taking a fruit leather sheet and putting it here on my tray, and I'm going to take my powder, and just because it's been sitting here while I've been demonstrating, it's even collected the moisture because it's a humid day even with your AC on. So I'll just spread out this powder, okay, just like this. And what I'm going to do is stick it into an oven that's heated to the lowest temperature possible for a little while and then turned off. I do not want to cook this. I want to let that heat absorb the moisture. It goes right into an oven. It will go right into the oven like this and stay there for about 15 or 20 minutes. And because we're about to use this, I didn't leave it in there long enough. But what you might find is when it comes out of the oven, it's got like the top has become kind of cakey and dry. And all you have to do is just do this and it will come apart with no problem whatsoever. Then you store this like you store powder in an airtight jar. If you want to put a moisture absorber into the jar with it to help when you open it and close it with the introduction of the moisture, that's fine too. We're going to end up using most of this today with our yogurt protein snack for the afternoon to have for my son. And because we're about to use this, I didn't leave it in there long enough. But what you might find is when it comes out of the oven, it's got a, like the top has become kind of cakey and dry. And all you have to do is just do this and it will come apart with no problem whatsoever. Then you store this like you store powder in an airtight jar with a lid. If you want to put a moisture absorber, if you want to put a moisture absorber into the jar with it to help when you open it and close it with the introduction of the moisture, that's fine too. We're going to end up using most of this today with our yogurt protein snack for the afternoon to have for my son. So I hope these tips have helped you. If you have tips on how you make your coffee grinder work well for you that I didn't share here today, I would love to see those in the comments below to help everybody else out. Because the more we get together, the more we teach each other, the better community it can be and the better help you'll have. So if you want to see more about doing dehydrated fruits and powders, check this video out right here. I've got a great recipe that I use with Rice Krispies treats that is just fantastic. And until I see you again next time, remember, nevertheless, she preserves.